Price increases will be coming. I mean, it's just a matter of when. 90% of our medications here that we consume every day, in one way or another, having China's involvement, that is a huge risk. The fact that it's never talked about, it's never brought up, tells you actually how important that is. That this is kind of the ace up their sleeve. We know there's uncertainty, so there will be consequences from that. I've seen it too many times firsthand in disaster scenarios. Things go bad and they go bad fast. I remember holding my child in my arms saying, I will never be dependent on this system again. That feeling of powerlessness, once you felt it, you'll do anything to never be in that position again. And it's just now is the time to get ready for all of this.
World War III is already happening.
This is a house of cards, and it is in the process of collapsing right now.
You're going to see an economic crash, the likes of which we've never seen.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with Dr. Sean Rowland from Jace Medical, the founder of Jace Medical, which is an excellent service for preppers. I use it frequently. It allows you to get actual prescription medications easily. You do everything online. You can get antibiotics. They're constantly expanding chronic medications that people might need. And it's a great way to build an emergency medicine supply. And in my personal opinion, this is one of the most invaluable preps that a person can have. It's one of the first things that I advise people to get. We're talking about a potential disaster scenario. What's going to kill you fastest? It's probably going to be some kind of illness. And I've had to dip into my Jace case probably 3 or 4 times since first getting it, which is quite a bit considering it's only been around for a couple years. So today we're going to talk about potential service disruptions, talk about the trade war, the tariffs, and what effect that's going to have on the price, to just give people a heads up on these changes that might be coming down the pike. So how's it going, Sean?
It's going well. Thanks for having us on. I think it's an important time to kind of pause and take a look at all these different things that are being affected by there's so much going on every day. It's a new headline, and we've been hearing a lot about these tariffs. Early on, we heard that maybe there would be certain industries or things that would be carved out, and that looks to be not the case. It's kind of across the board, and so certainly when we talk about access to medications, very important, vital antibiotics and other medications that do, unfortunately, have for the most part have their origins over in China. So we are already hearing from our suppliers that we should anticipate this increase in pricing due to the tariffs. That could be it's directly related to the medications. There's other, the case that the medications come in and some other things that we've tried to do to get away from being reliant on China as much as possible. But there's other downstream effects to this whole process that we're also trying to factor in. And so I guess at the end of the day, what we're trying to get out here and just let people know, there's a high likelihood that we will see some price increases, not just us, but the general public going to your pharmacy, going across the board. We work with
these aren't your, like, it's not just you guys that get pharmaceuticals from China. Right. Isn't it like 80 or 90% come from there?
Right. We're talking worldwide. Everyone's going to the same place to get their medications. And then here in the United States, we work with the same suppliers that supply Walgreens and Walmart and CVS and, all your major retail pharmacies. And so this is something that's going to be felt across the board. And we have tried, using different suppliers and really putting feelers out there with all of them to try and anticipate what's coming. And what we are hearing from all these different suppliers and wholesalers is that, yes, price increases will be coming, and it's just a matter of when. And so now's the time, as we always are saying, now is the time to prepare. Another interesting thing that we talked about a little bit before was not only do we have the tariffs, but we also have other things going on that seem to be increasing, not decreasing tensions between the United States and China. We see Taiwan making large economic commitments inside the United States to help with chip building companies, for example, and so those ties are becoming more solid. And these are the kinds of things that just add tension to the U.S.-China relationship, and will likely have other downstream effects. So again, things heating up, not cooling down, and it's now. Now is the time to get ready for all of this.
Yeah, and it seems like China would have a lot of leverage in that negotiation, because if they have this amount of control over the medicines flowing into the United States, that could definitely be something they use as a pretty important bargaining chip.
It's something that the fact that it's never talked about, it's never brought up, certainly by us or by them, tells you actually how important that is. That this is in many ways kind of the ace up their sleeve. They know they've got the immense leverage there. If things really, push really came to shove, they could cause a world of hurt to the world, but certainly to North America, to the United States, Canada included. And so, yes, I think that's an interesting insight to talk about. It's one of those things that Congress says here and there. They'll make some reference to, but we really don't hear much about it. It's all about computer chips and other things that they're okay talking about, but they don't talk about our medications. They don't talk about 90% of our medications here that we consume every day not being made here, and most of them having, in one way or another, having China's involvement. So that is a huge risk.
And especially considering that America is so medicated already. I mean, it's just not a good position to be in. And it explains actually why they're less than what's being imposed on Canada and Mexico. I'm sure the Trump administration knows the potential ramifications of getting into this trade war on medication, which is already pretty overpriced in the US. So if those companies want to continue to make their margins, then they have to raise the price.
Yeah, we've heard different numbers. It's hard, even without this, there's natural kind of price fluctuations when you look at some of these, specifically the medication that we deal in with these generics, a lot of them antibiotics and just those daily medications you take for a daily chronic condition. And so we're always looking at, different relationships with different wholesalers. One day you might see a price spike in one medication and we'll source it from somewhere else, always trying to pass on these savings. And it seems like some of the early data that we've seen, it varies, but anywhere from 10 to 30+% of an increase in medication pricing. Still a lot of uncertainty in where that lands and for how long. But those are some of the numbers we're hearing.
That's a pretty significant increase. And I think that's probably a best case scenario, many ways that this could go in terms of potential conflict arising, which is kind of where the conversation seems to be moving now. It's looking like the target date for that, based on most of the military analysts, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 2027.
Yeah, I heard that. This was a little while ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So, either way, we're looking at either a trade war, which will, in the best case, probably lead to significant increases in price, or not having that medication at all, which would be a complete disaster.
Yeah, more uncertainty. I think that's what a lot of this is. We're seeing it reflected in the markets and other areas that uncertainty makes people nervous. It's hard to plan for things. And for us, I think these are the signs that we should see around us to say, okay, there's a lot of uncertainty here. Things could go in ways that we're talking about stuff right now. And there, any number of different scenarios could play out, the stuff that we're not even thinking about as consequences of consequences. And that's what happens in uncertain environments. So what can you do in your world, in your sphere. There's there's not a whole lot, but focus on those things that you can make certain. And one of those things is access to vital medications that you or your loved ones might will depend on. And this actually brings up an interesting point. I think, we built this company around the need to empower people for uncertain times, for emergencies, for these supply chain disruptions, understanding our dependence on a system that has been proven in the past to fail us when it's needed the most. So while that was really what was behind why Jace was built, come to find out, as we've now been doing this for a number of years, that the people who have heard that message, taken action, got themselves a Jace case, end up, as you said, as we started here, end up using and needing the medications in there just throughout the course of their everyday lives. It just becomes the most convenient, timely, easy, and cheap way to get help when you do have an infection and you need access to those medications. And it's not just I put it on my shelf and I'm going to leave it there for 10 years and hope I never need to use it. It turns out, and our data proves this, that you do end up needing it, and you typically end up needing it within the first couple of months of having it. And so it's one more thing to keep in mind that this is not just maybe there will be a war that kicks off, maybe there will be this, maybe there will be that. We know there's uncertainty, so there will be consequences from that, number one. And number two, humans are humans. Humans get sick. Bacterial illnesses 100 years ago, that's what everyone was dying from. We're so used to now having quick access to these medications that it's just a convenience. And so these medications will get used in one form or another for yourself, for a loved one in your family. So that's one more thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I had a really nasty dental infection. And so I had to, dip into the Jace case. And the convenience factor, depending on where you live, I guess, there might be fees associated with going and seeing a physician. And you guys give guidance on how people should administer and self-administer.
Yeah, when it is appropriate to use the medication, when it's not,
right.
and how. Absolutely, that's an important part of the service.
Yeah, so it's not just pill popping willy-nilly, but there is definitely a convenience factor. And interesting thing I just thought about as we're having this conversation is, you can, if you look at the U.S. strategic stockpiles of various commodities, most of those things can be found locally. Like you can buy food locally. You can buy ammunition. It's made in, the United States for preppers. That's one of the cornerstones is firearms and ammunition. Water is locally accessible. Most of what you need to sustain life, you can acquire locally, with the exception of medicine. It's really the one thing that you can't source locally and is most dependent on the global supply chain. For that reason alone, it should be one of those things that people are looking at first.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting observation. You could even add, locally sourced, or somehow you're able to find alternative sourcing, as you mentioned, for just about everything else. There's that, and then there's just the barriers. You don't need anything to buy all the things you mentioned. It may be in the case of firearms or ammunition, you've got to be old enough, but you don't need a special license or anything like that.
You do here in Canada.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there you go. With medications, though, yeah, these are prescription medications. They're not just on a shelf for you to go and grab. There's a whole process that needs to take place. So there's a lot of barriers to that. And to your point, yeah, this is something that should be reprioritized if it isn't already at the top of the list. And I have to say, like, I'm a horrible salesperson. I don't have it in me to just kind of, but this is really truly how I feel. I'm very passionate about it. I've seen it too many times firsthand in disaster scenarios, in my medical practice, where that access, when it's taken for granted, which it is by everybody every day, when it's removed, things go bad and they go bad fast. And so reprioritizing where the medications fall on your preparedness list, they really need to be up there at the top for all those reasons mentioned.
I mean, myself personally, Jace doesn't send me stuff like for free every year. You guys have sent me some samples, but I personally go out and repurchase a Jace every time I'm able to do it, just to kind of increase my stocks of stuff, because I just understand the value of it. I mean, you can't put a value on antibiotics and the other medications that you guys have as well. When the Jace first came out, I was so excited about it because this was something that was a huge, problem for preppers, because, you got to go through all the hoops. And as you've said in the past, if you have a good relationship with your physician, they'll probably prescribe you stuff, but it's a awkward conversation. With Jace, it's streamlined. It's easy. You got to answer some questions. You got to, a doctor will call you and have a chat with you or text you. But above and beyond that, I mean, it's really easy to do. And,
Yeah, that's been the goal is to remove that friction, that process that is typically, whether it's awkward, whether it's inconvenient, all of those, whether it's expensive, remove all of those different friction points and make this as accessible to as many people as possible. It's part of the mission. It's what we believe in. It's why we're here. And then supporting those people afterwards, as you mentioned, with whether that's answering questions about their medications or their situation. We're in it for the long term, and it's something that we're very passionate about. Everybody at the company, and we're always trying to push the boundaries and solve problems, increase access. That's why we're here. It's because we all believe in what is to come. The uncertainty that we firmly believe will continue to grow. When we finally hit that tipping point, nobody knows, but certainly seeing, all of this, the craziness around us, but then also seeing just in our everyday lives, like we touched on already, it's the middle of the night, and rather than have to bundle up and figure out how you're going to go get to the one pharmacy that's still open, and I mean, those kinds of things I think everybody can relate to. And that's
potentially, sorry to interrupt you, but that's potentially dangerous too in a disaster, to be exposing yourself to. I mean, if we have another pandemic or something and you got to go down to where a bunch of sick people are, or who knows what sort of lawlessness is unfolding. I mean, not having to do that is a huge benefit.
Yep. It's huge, and I think we maybe even joked about it in a previous one, but you always have in any of those, whether it's a pandemic kind of movie, a zombie, whatever the horrible scenario is, there's always, they always have to go out of their way in some super dangerous situation to get to the pharmacy to get their medications. So let's take that part out of the equation and stay safe, stay secure in an environment that you control. Any number of reasons there to think about, and we're trying to put everything out there because some things resonate with others, with certain people more than others.
Well, it also benefits the system itself. It takes the stress off the system. The more people are not clogging up the doctor's offices or pharmacies for stuff that they could have been more proactive with and gotten in advance, then that potentially alleviates tension on the stress on the system. So
I've been in those situations, and on both sides. I've been on the side of part of the system that's when you're in whether it's a mass casualty or even at the beginning of the pandemic, where exactly that you had people who stressing the system, and then there's just this chain reaction that happens that everyone now gets affected and hurt by, or on the other end of it, where I've had one of my children sick and needed to get them to a specialty hospital, and you had people who were not nearly as acutely ill who were there, making the whole, just kind of gumming up the whole system. And I remember holding my child in my arms saying, I will never be dependent on this system again. This is never going to happen to me or my kids again. And working to get our personal situation to a point where I could handle these kinds of scenarios on my own. That feeling of powerlessness is something that once you felt it, I think you'll do anything to get yourself situated to never be in that position again.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have been at this for a couple years now. You started off just with the antibiotics, and then you expanded it to Jace Daily, which is another great option. You can get things like EpiPens and inhalers, life-saving things potentially that could require prescriptions. And then you expanded it out to more, chronic medications. Is there any new development since the last time we spoke with respect to different types of medications or the services that you offer?
Yeah, we continue to add medications just about every day to that chronic medication list. We've increased what's available as you start with that base case, and then you mentioned a few of them, but you can add on to that. You can add on the inhalers, the EpiPens, quite a few others. I think about 30 other types of emergency medications that you wouldn't necessarily need to take every day, but they're those emergent situations to add and augment your Jace case. We've increased, we added the pediatric case for the younger population. And then what we've done is try to increase, I guess, find scenarios where someone might not be, you mentioned some of the younger folk who maybe don't see themselves, they don't take medications hardly ever. And it's just harder for, when I was 20, I'd never stepped foot inside of a hospital I didn't need anything like that. And so that was just far from my mind. But for travelers, people who maybe they know they're going overseas somewhere, maybe, or we have these use case specific kits that are smaller, more streamlined, don't have as many meds, they're cheaper as a result. And so we've added a number of those, like our UTI, specifically for women who suffer from UTIs regularly. They know when a UTI is coming, they know what it is, they know what they need. And rather than have to go through all those hoops that we mentioned before, here's a kit specifically just for that. The price point's is a lot lower than the big case. So we've got a few of those kinds of things that we've added on, and then we definitely have some new. I'll just have to tease it pretty generally, but this is some new product, new service, I guess. I'll say that we can expect it in the next couple of months. Nothing that will replace what we're currently doing, but getting into a new area that we haven't before this been able to help folks with. And I'm talking more about supplies rather than just medications. And so we'll definitely have more to talk about there in the future, and really excited for what it means for our patients.
And what about things like one of the big sticking points for a lot of preppers is always anesthetics? Like what sort of localized anesthetics, things like a lidocaine, or like if you have to freeze an area or something like that. Is that something that will be available at some point, do you think?
I want to say yes, because it is something we're actively discussing. There are certain additional education pieces that need that kind of a higher bar that needs to be met there. And of course, the physicians, the physician network that we work with, that obviously has to have full buy-in there. But it's something that we are 100% aware of, and may have come up with some interesting solutions for. So I'll just tease it that way.
I know, painkillers are obviously one of those things that are a potential
kind of a no-go, right?
Yeah, and so unfortunately, because of that, these are things that actually could be very essential in one of these situations. So having some alternative way of dealing with pain is going to be a problem. Unfortunately, it's always, it's considered, I guess, I don't know if it's considered a narcotic or whatever the classification is.
Yeah, I mean, and there are non-narcotic certainly very effective non-narcotic ways of managing pain. That kind of gets into more of the education component, things that are available. And but yeah, in a scenario with more localized anesthetic, like you mentioned, that's a very specific use case. That up until now there is not a solution for, and we're hopeful that we may have figured something out there.
Yeah, like if you had to suture or do something like that.
Yeah.
Is there any other offerings that you can think of off the top of your head, or?
It's been talked about for a long time. I'm sure you even talked about it before. Really, all that people have access to right now is the potassium iodine, which, as you may know, is really very limited in what it actually treats. So if you really were exposed in a nuclear fallout kind of situation, it's I don't want to say useless, but it's not.
It's more of a prophylactic, if anything.
Well, it's for very specific. It's only for one very specific radioisotope, and it only protects one organ in your body, your thyroid, and then there's only a certain population age that would benefit from it. So I guess I'd say it's better than nothing, but it's a very limited part of what's needed in a nuclear fallout or radiation exposure scenario. There's other non-medical things that are probably more important that deserve more attention. But on the pharmaceutical side, there's really only one other option in an oral medication, and that should be a part of anyone's radiation exposure kit, which we are going to be putting out here very soon. That particular medication, it's up until it took us a year to get to where we needed to get with this particular. There's one manufacturer in the world that makes this medication, and it's limited, it's expensive. So we've been working really hard on that relationship, and finally got it kind of nailed down. Okay. And I'll just say, you'll see, it's called radiogardas. It's Prussian blue is what people know it as. There are some services out there who will give this to you in their radiation kit. But the word of warning I have for and I have a real issue with it. I have to be careful. Maybe you'll have to edit some of this out because I don't like to talk bad about our competitors. But it's a disservice, and it's dangerous what they're doing, because they make you feel like, I'm covered now. I've got this medication that no one else has. Well, what they don't tell you is that they've given you less than 1 day's dose.
Now, isn't there a medication in the Jace Daily that treats radiation sickness to a certain degree, or is it? I can't remember which one it was, but there was something in there that has like
really no. What your limit? You can treat symptoms, and there's some interesting research that
like nausea.
Which one?
Like, is there like some anti-nausea?
Yeah, medication? so like, you can treat symptoms, certainly. So like the Zofran, the ondansetron,
right?
To help with the vomiting, because you're going to end up getting dehydrated, and then you end up dying from organ failure from dehydration, and versus the radiation itself. So yes, there's things you can do to treat the symptoms when it comes to radiation illness, and that would be one. But really, to actually treat it, well, I was mentioning there's an interesting study that was done that looked at ciprofloxacin of all medications in very high doses, seemed to have a really protective effect when it was used in these lab rats that they exposed and could monitor. It's pretty experimental, and I would hesitate to really get too far into that. But the other piece is really you're trying to protect. You're trying to leach out those radioisotopes. And so that's what the Prussian blue does. It works in your gut. Think of it kind of like activated charcoal, when you take a poison and the activated charcoal. So the Prussian blue acts with a couple of different specific radioisotopes so that you eliminate them from your body. And this is done through your GI tract. So it's just adding to your list of what am I protected from. With the radioactive iodine, you've got the potassium, and then with Prussian blue, you've got a couple other radioisotopes that you're protected from. There's one other on the list. It's IV. It's not something that you could ever administer at home, but the Prussian flu is a big one that up until recently has not been available to the general public. So that's an exciting one, I guess, to talk about.
Okay, good stuff. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of other things on the horizon, so I'd encourage people. I'll post a link in the description below, and I'll pin the comment and get a Jace case while the getting's good, I guess. And, hopefully the worst we have to look at is an increase in prices. The potential worst case scenario is that these medications aren't available at all. And it really does just feel as though something's about to break in the system. I can't quite pinpoint it. Like you said, there's a confluence of factors that could coalesce into some crisis. It could be cyber related. It could be, embargo related, trade war related. Even if just from the place of convenience, I found it to be very useful to have that peace of mind, especially if you live far away from town like I do. To not have to drive into town, like you said, at the middle of the night. So, yeah, guys, go check it out. And if you want more information, I guess, if you have questions, maybe you can pop into the comment section and answer those.
Yeah. We're happy to engage any way that helps people. If it's through the comment section, if they want to write in directly, answers at jacemedical.com. We're ready and looking forward to helping answer any type of questions.
Good stuff. Thanks a lot, Sean.
Thanks, Nate.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.